Once again, greetings to all of our brothers and sisters and also visitors here to the True Jesus Church in Queens.
我们再次问候所有来参加皇后区安息日的弟兄姐妹还有慕道朋友们。
As many of the Queens members can see, today's Sabbath service coincides with the East Region Young Adult Spiritual Convocation.
那我们皇后区教会的弟兄姐妹可以看得到，我们今天安息日，同时也是我们东区的青年灵恩会。
And the theme for this weekend, this convocation, is remember now your Creator in the days of your youth.
我们今年东区青年灵恩会的主题就是现在记住我们的创造者，然后在青年的时候。
Right. This is based off that very famous verse in Ecclesiastes chapter 12.
这是在传道书12章非常有名的一段经节。
Right, so thank God this weekend, not only myself will be speaking on this topic, but later on Preacher Ho will be coming too.
那所以这个周末不只是我会讲道理，然后侯传道也会。
Okay, so for myself, I have been assigned 4 classes.
对我已经有被安排了4堂课。
And so I'd like to divide my classes into 4 subtopics.
所以我的课要分4个小主题。
The first topic is this morning's sermon.
第一个的就是今天早上聚会的主题
Which is seeing clearly under the sun.
在日光下看清。
In the afternoon, we'll talk about another topic, which is to redeem the time.
下午会谈到的就是要珍惜光阴。
Okay. And then in the second session this afternoon, we'll talk about the topic, what youths ought to remember.
下午第2节会谈到青年当记得什么。
Okay. And then tomorrow in the last class I'll be teaching, we'll be talking about your portion in life and in toil under the sun.
明天最后一堂课会谈到在日头下面你的部分。
Okay. Yeah. So now let's talk about the first topic, right?
所以我们现在要谈第一个主题。
Right. To see clearly under the sun.
在日头下看清。
Yeah, so most of my classes will be focusing on the content from the book of Ecclesiastes.
所以我的课程大部分内容就都是有关传道书12章。
And I think for some of you, when you look at the topic, you could see that there is already a phrase that constantly repeats itself in Ecclesiastes.
当我们看传道书的时候，我们就可以常常看到有会重复的。
Right? Under the sun is this phrase.
就是在日头下那这一段。
Okay, this repeats in Ecclesiastes 29 times.
在传道书有重复了29遍。
So what does the author mean when he uses this phrase?
所以当作者谈到这一句话的时候，他这是说什么意思？
It's basically, literally talking about whatever that happens, that's under the sun.
基本上就是按照字面上所说的，就是所有日头下发生的事。
Talking about our physical life.
我们肉体的生活。
Everything that happens on this earth that basks in the light of the sun.
所有在这世界下，就是日头下会被影响到的。
Okay? Talking about this physical existence that we have.
这世界上这有存在的。
Right? And so Solomon in Ecclesiastes also talks about a lot of the different things that people will pursue under the sun.
传道书在所罗门他也有谈到很多人会在日头下要追求的事。
Right? He himself also pursued many of these different things.
他自己也追求了很多事。
Okay? And that's what we'll be talking about later. Right?
这就是我们今天也会谈到的。
But we also need to be careful as we pursue some of these things.
可是当我们在追求这些事的时候，也当小心。
Right? Because in this life, under the sun, we might become blinded by the sun.
因为在我们这生活当中，当我们在追求这些事，也许我们也会被日头给伤害到。
Right? I think we all have had that experience before. Maybe you're driving and then the sun is setting.
我们应该都有这个体验过，就是在开车的时候，然后日落时。
And then right when you're driving, the sun's right in your eyes.
一边在开车当中，太阳却照着你的眼睛。
Right? And then so it's very difficult to see at that moment.
在那一刹那就很难看清。
Sometimes even difficult to tell if the traffic light is a red or a green.
甚至很难看清到底红绿灯是红灯还是绿灯。
Because that light of the sun is so bright, and then we can't really see clearly.
因为阳光照得那么亮，那很难看清楚。
Right? So therefore, in this life under the sun, we need to learn to see clearly.
所以在这日头下的这生活，我们需要看清楚。
And this is referring to seeing this life with a spiritual lens.
这是让我们看到用灵性的这种光来看
Right? To look at this life with that eternal lens too.
还有用这个永生的这个眼光来看。
Okay, so this morning's message, I'd like to divide it into 4 parts.
所以今天早上的讯息要分成4个部分。
Right? First, we'll talk about to see clearly the nature of wisdom and knowledge.
第一个就是看清智慧和知识的本质。
And then secondly, we'll talk about seeing clearly the nature of labor and accomplishments.
第二个是看清劳动和成就的本质。
Thirdly, we'll talk about seeing clearly the nature of mirth and pleasure.
第三个是看清欢乐和享受的本质。
Then finally, we'll talk about seeing clearly the nature of wealth and possessions.
最后一个就是看清财富和资产的本
Right?
质。
All of these can blind us if we're not careful.
这些都很有可能，如果我们不小心，就会把我们弄瞎。
And then we live this life under the sun without a clear direction.
然后我们活在这生活中，那我们就没有清楚的方向。
And then in the end, we might regret all the things that we put so much time and energy in.
到最后，我们会很后悔，我们花了那么多的辛劳。
Okay, so let's now talk about the first subtopic, right?
所以我们看第一个小主题。
Right? Let's look at what Solomon eventually talked about regarding wisdom and knowledge.
我们看所罗门他谈到有关于智慧和知识的。
Let's turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 1.
传道书1章，
Ecclesiastes chapter 1.
传道书1章。
Let's read from verse 12.
12节，
Ecclesiastes chapter 1 from verse 12.
传道书1章12节。
Then I turned myself to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who succeeds the king? Only what he has already done. Verse 13.
13节，
Then I saw that wisdom excels folly, as light excels darkness. Verse 14.
14节，
The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I perceived that the same event happens to them all. Right? Verse 15.
15节，
So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said to my heart, this also is vanity. Right? Verse 16.
16节，
For there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As the fool, right? Verse 17.
17节，
Therefore I hated life because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all was vanity and grasping for the wind. Okay. Here we can see Solomon is reflecting on his pursuit of wisdom and knowledge.
所以我们在这里可以看到所罗门他追求了智慧和知识。
Okay. According to verse 13,
在2章13节，
he eventually did realize that wisdom excels folly.
他发现到智慧胜过愚昧，
So there is a value. There is a value to wisdom. There is a value to knowledge.
智慧知识是有价值的。
Okay. Yeah. And I think all of us are aware of that as well.
我们也都知道，
Okay. This type of wisdom and knowledge is referring to a more like a secular, worldly type of wisdom.
这一种的智慧其实是谈到世界上的。
And again, that in itself, even though it's a worldly, secular type of knowledge or wisdom, that does have value.
就算这是世俗的这种智慧，可是还是有价值。
And this is what people will be pursuing if they have opportunity.
如果人有机会的话，他们也会追求这个。
That's why for especially the younger generations that have opportunity to go to university, get a higher degree, then they will do that.
所以通常年轻人有机会能够上大学的话，就会追求这种知识。
Right? Or their parents will encourage them to do that, right? Because they see the value in it.
或是他们家长也会鼓励他们要追求，因为他们知道这有价
Right?
值。
They'll even pay a lot of money, right, every year, even go into debt to try to accumulate that type of knowledge.
他们甚至每年会花很多钱，甚至有欠债，然后就是要为了追求这个。
Okay? So there is a value to secular wisdom and knowledge.
所以世俗的智慧知识是有价值的。
Okay? But then Solomon started to realize the limitations of wisdom and knowledge.
可是后来所罗门有看到这些知识的限
He
制，
was able to see things more clearly, right?
他看事情更清楚，
And he eventually starts to share it here with us.
然后也开始在这里跟我们分享。
I want to focus on verse 18 now, right?
我们看18节，
Okay, let's go to chapter. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I think I read the wrong chapter. Yeah, I read the wrong chapter. Let's go back to chapter 1.
第1章
Ecclesiastes chapter 1, right?
讲到11
Okay.
章
Let's also see verse 13, right?
13节，
Chapter 1, verse 13. Right?
1章13节。
And I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under the heaven, right? This burdensome task God has given to the sons of man, by which they may be exercised. Okay. Let's read also verse 16. Yeah, 16 and 17.
16节、17
Okay.
节。
I communed with my heart, saying, Look, I have attained greatness and have gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. 17.
17
And I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is grasping for the wind. Right? Please read verse 16 and 17.
16节，我心里议论说，我得了大智慧，胜过我以前在耶路撒冷的众人，而且我心中多经历智慧和知识的事。17，我又专心查明智慧、狂妄和愚昧，乃知这也是捕风。
Okay. So here again is even more clearly Solomon pursuing wisdom. Right?
所以这里更清楚的看到所罗门在追求智
And
慧，
his heart was able to have great understanding, wisdom, and knowledge.
他心中有多经历智慧和知识，
Even more than people who were before him. Right?
胜过他以前的人。
But then what was his realization? What were the things he was be able to see after gaining all this?
可是他却发现的还有得到的是什么？
Let's read chapter 1, verse 18. Right?
1章18节。
For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow.
因为多有智慧，就多有愁烦；加增知识的，就加增忧伤。
So wisdom and knowledge does have value, but there's also some negative things to it too.
智慧和知识是有价值，可是也有负面的。
For Solomon, he realized with much wisdom, there is much grief.
对所罗门，他发现到多有智慧，就多有愁烦；
Where there's more knowledge, then there's going to be more sorrow.
多有知识，就多有忧伤。
And I think this is also the modern day experience too.
这也是当代的这种问题
Right? In more advanced countries with more educational background,
在文化更发达的地方，还有更多知识的人。
we actually can see there's more cases of depression. Right?
其实我们可以看到，有更多人有忧郁症。
Yeah, obviously there's many factors that contribute to that.
当然，这还是有很多的因素。
Right? But Solomon is saying there's this trend, right? More wisdom, more grief, more knowledge, more sorrow.
可是所罗门就有谈到这里说，多有智慧，就多有愁烦。
Right? For us who have more intimate knowledge of the way the world works, right? We also will start to worry about more things.
当我们更详细的了解到世界是如何的运转，那我们就会担心更多事。
I know a sister who studied microbiology,
我知道有一个姐妹，她在学习微生物，
right? And before she really liked to eat sushi,
她以前很喜欢吃寿司，
but after she studied microbiology,
可是在她学习了微生物学后，
she didn't eat sushi anymore.
她就不再吃寿司了。
I never asked her what she learned or what she found out,
我没有问她到底发现到什么，
right? But she must have learned something,
她一定有学到什么，
and so she doesn't want to eat raw fish, right?
所以她就不想要吃生鱼片。
We know just a few days ago, the air quality of New York or the whole East Coast, it really went it was very hazardous. Right?
我们知道前几天在整个东岸的天气是非常 污染指数
Of
非常
course, there
高。
were some moments where it's extremely obvious this is bad air,
当然有些的时候就看到很明显这是不好的空
right?
气。
Especially Wednesday around 2 p.m., right?
星
In New
期
York.
三大概下午2点在纽约
The
时候，
whole sky just turned dark orange.
一片天都是橙色。
Right? But then there were some other times where it seems okay.
可是有的时候看起来好像还
But
好，
then the air quality index told you it's over 150 parts per million.
可是空气污染指数会告诉你已经超过150。
And then you learn from the news, if you inhale a lot of these particles that are under 2.5 microns, it's going to lodge in your lungs and you can't really, it doesn't really escape your system.
可是新闻上面也有报道说，如果你是呼吸进去这些微生物的话，因为已经太小，然后可是其实也没有办法排出。
Yeah, so like it's over 150, then it's basically like smoking packs of cigarettes when you're outside.
所以如果空气污染指数是超过150的话，那就是等于你在外面在抽烟。
So with that increased knowledge is more worry, more sorrow. Right?
所以就像多有这种知识，那就多有忧伤。
Right? But in comparison, those who maybe did not know about this, then they just kind of carry on with their life.
可是做这对比，如果不了解这些的话，那就会继续活下去。
Right? 2 days ago, I went down to Lancaster County in Pennsylvania.
2天前我去宾州的 Lancaster 地方，
That day, also air quality was improving, but still considered poor.
那一天的空气污染指数虽然有好转，可是还是不好。
And in Lancaster County, I think we know there is the many Amish people.
在宾州也有很多Amish 这种人。
And in this community, many of the more conservative ones have rejected modern technology and then modern electrical type of appliances.
信这种宗教的，他们其实是都非常的传统，而且甚至都不会使用我们现代的很多东
Right?
西。
So as you're driving on the road, you see them using those traditional plows, using the like horses or donkeys or or even cows, right? Bulls to pull the plows.
当你开车经过的时候，都会看到他们还是在用传统的用牛来帮他们耕田，或是马车。
And so that day, even though the air quality was poor, but they were still out there, right? Just farming and doing what they needed to do.
所以虽然那一天的空气污染已经不好了，可是他们还是继续做工。
Right? They didn't even know, right? They maybe didn't even know. Of course, maybe they saw certain times where it was really bad, but when it improved, I don't even think they really knew all these intimate details.
也许他们可以看到天气有好转的时候，可是也许他们都还不知道任何详细的资料。
So this is something that can help us to view wisdom and knowledge, the secular wisdom and knowledge, in a more balanced way.
所以这是让我们能够用平衡的方式来看世俗的知识。
Yeah, there's a value, but then there's also a cost,
有价值，可是还是有个代价，
right? Which is that we will also increase in sorrow, right?
就是我们会加增忧伤。
Let's also now go back to chapter 2, verse 15.
我们看回去2章15
Right?
节
We read this a little bit earlier.
之前有念了
In chapter 2, verse 15,
2章15节，
Solomon makes another observation.
所罗门他又有一个观察，
He said, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me, right? And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this also is vanity.
我就心里说，愚昧人所遇见的，我也必遇见。我为何更有智慧呢？我心里说，这也是虚空。
Right? Here, Solomon is talking about death. Right?
这里所罗门是谈到死亡
Right? Death is the universal great equalizer.
死亡就是这全宇宙所有的人都将遇见的。
Because no matter how much you had in this world, if you're the wisest person or the foolish person, everybody is going to have to face death.
不管你有什么，你是最有智慧或是最愚昧的，都还是会面临死亡。
And so Solomon was thinking about, hey, even though perhaps in this life I was the wiser one,
所以所罗门就想到，虽然也许在这个生活中我是最有智慧的，
right? But in the end, it's just so temporary.
可是到最后，这真的也是很短暂。
Right? Maybe temporarily I can enjoy more wisdom, more knowledge than other people, but all of us are going to go to the grave.
也许我在短暂的时候可以得到更多的智慧，比其他人更多，可是到最后还是都跟其他人一
Right?
样。
So today is the same principle. Right?
今天也是一样的
No matter
原
how
则。
much wisdom or knowledge you accumulate,
不管你是累积了多少的智慧或知
no
识，
matter how many degrees you eventually complete,
不管你是念到了多少的学位，
one day you will have to face death. Right?
有一天你还是要面临死
And
亡。
so we need to balance things properly. Right?
所以我们一定要都有平
We
衡
need，to see, what is the end of life.
要看到生命的结尾是什么。
In verse 16, he also laments another truth.
16节还有谈到另外一个真理，
Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 16.
传道书2章16节，
It says, For there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. Right? And how does a wise man die? As the fool. Right, please read.
16节，智慧人和愚昧人一样，永远无人纪念，因为日后都被忘记。可叹智慧人死亡，与愚昧人无异。
Yeah, truly, this is also a sad fact about, accumulating a lot of wisdom and knowledge.
这是很悲伤，可是这是真理，就是谈到这知识。
In life, you might accumulate a lot, but in the end, you might be able to speak up and explain so many different things, but in the end, you will be forgotten.
也许你可以累积很多的智慧，那可以解释很多事情，可是到最后还是会被忘记。
Today, maybe we might be able to remember some names,
也许今天我们记得一些名字
but，you don't actually remember the person, right? Who he was, what his voice was like, how, what his personality was.
可是你不会真正记得他们是什么样的个性，或是声音，或是什么样的人。
But then that's only some select few too.
而且这也都只是少数的人。
Most people who were very wise and and had a lot of knowledge, actually now we have forgotten about them, right?
大部分有很多智慧或是知识的人，我们都已经忘记了。
Right? Maybe some of us here are math majors,
也许我们有的人是主修数学，
right? Do you know who was the first person to really come up with the modern day rules of the number 0? Right?
你们知不知道是谁真正的决定很多规矩是有关于数学这个零？
Yeah. Right. Actually, this was like the number 0 really had to kind of be invented, right?
因为零这个数字是要被发明的。
Yeah. So, it was this person named Brahmagupta, right? Brahmagupta,
那个人
right? The modern math system, right?
他发明了现代数学的
There's another
系
person
统。
too, right?
还有另外一个人，
Right? He was a founder of algebra, right?
他发现了代数，
And he also basically came up with the positional numbering system of modern day mathematics, right?
数学
Yeah.
定位。还有
So the ones places, they're worth one each, right?
Just-
The tens place is worth 10 each, right?
就是像个位数、十位数，
Right? That's actually it took people to invent that, right?
这是需要有人发明的。
Because if you think about the Roman times,
因为如果我们想到罗马时
right, I
代
think some of you know Roman numerals too,
比如说罗马数字，
right? Like Super Bowl, right? Super Bowl, like LX, Super Bowl 60, right?
比如说美式足球的超级杯，那是LX 的话就是60，
Right? Or you just think about Chinese numbers,
或是中文数字，
right? And then how they write out those numbers.
数字的字是怎么写的？
Actually, modern mathematics goes back to this other guy, right?
现代数学其实都是根源在这个人
This guy named Al-Khwarizmi, right? Al-Khwarizmi, right?
那个。
Right? And that's why we say today's numbers are Arabic numbers, right? Because this guy, he was Arab.
所以其实我们现在常常都会说现代数字的话是阿拉伯数字，因为那个人是阿拉伯人。
But we all have, I think all of us have forgotten about these people, right?
可是我们都已经忘记这些人了。
So even if you were very wise and knowledgeable, right?
所以就算你是很有知识的人，
In the end, and many people will forget about you. Right?
到最后很多人都会忘记你，
Only some historians, right?
只有少数的历史学家。
Yeah. So this is the nature of wisdom and knowledge. Right?
这个就是智慧还有知
We
识
have
的
to see it clearly. Right?
本性，我们要看
Let's now
清。
talk about the next point.
看下一点，
We also need to see clearly the nature of labor and accomplishments.
我们要看清劳动和成就的本质。
We read before Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 17.
传道书2章17节，
This was where Solomon was saying he hated life because of the work that was done under the sun.
所罗门说：“我所以恨恶生命，因为在日光之下所行的事，我都以为烦恼。”
Right? It was distressing him, right? For all is vanity and grasping for the wind.
他以为烦恼，因为都是虚空，都是捕风。
Okay? So, of course, Solomon not only pursued a lot of wisdom and knowledge, he also put a lot of effort in trying to create things.
所以所罗门他不只追求了很多的智慧和知识，他也想要创造很多东西。
Okay? He tried to gain a lot of different accomplishments.
他很想要得到很多的成就。
Okay? But eventually, he also came to some conclusions.
可是他后来还是有做了个结论。
Let's go back to Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 3.
我们看回去传道书1章3节。
Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 3.
1章3节。
What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? Okay, let's jump now to verse 8.
8节。
Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 8.
1章8节。
All things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Okay, verse 9.
9节。
That which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Verse 10.
10节。
Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new? It has already been in ancient times before us. Right? Verse 11.
11节。
There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be remembrance of things that are to come by those who will come after. Okay, please read chapter 1, verse 3.
3节。人一切的劳碌都是他在日光之下的劳碌，有什么益处呢？
And verse 8.
8节。万事令人厌烦，人不能说尽，眼看看不饱，耳听听不足。
Yeah, these are some of Solomon's reflections of all of his labor.
这是所罗门在看他的劳碌的感想。
He lamented that really, in the end, after all of this, there's no true profit. There's no true gain after he toils for all of this.
他叹息的就是，虽然有一切这些劳碌，可是没有什么益处。
Right? Yeah, even though physically he might have been able to do something, but it just does not feel lasting or satisfying.
也许肉体上你能够做什么事，可是其实是没有得到满足，
Right? He just feels that it is a vanity, a chasing after the wind.
就感觉这就是捕风。
Right? And then in verse 8, he says, many things are full of labor.
然后8节就说万事令人厌烦。
Right? So this is actually talking about that in the course of labor, you are always having to toil and work very hard.
所以在劳碌的时候，就是还是要一直做工。
Okay? Even though you are working so hard and gaining this and gaining that,
虽然你很认真的工作，然后有得到这些，
once you gain something, you're still not satisfied.
但在你做好事情后，你还是不满足。
Right? That's why in verse 8, right, the eye is not satisfied,
所以8节就说眼看看不饱，
right? Nor the ear filled with hearing. Okay?
耳听听不足。
Yeah, just this isn't this satisfaction that results from all that labor.
就是没有这个做完工的这种满足。
Okay? And then in verse 9 through 10, right?
9节到10节，
Solomon also says essentially what you have been doing also is what people have been doing in the past too.
所罗门就談到，其實我們在做這些以前的事，人都已經做這些事了。
Right? Nothing is truly new under the sun.
在日光之下，並無新事，
Right? No one can really say, see, this is new.
沒有人能夠真正說這是新的。
Right? So truly, if you think about our earthly labor, right, it all boils down to something that has been done before.
如果我們想想看，地上做的這些勞苦的事，其實都是有做過的。
Right? Like earlier this week, Apple was announcing that new, was it Vision something Pro? Vision, what's it called? Something. Yeah. Anyway, that the new augmented reality, the goggles.
那前幾天蘋果就有說，他們將會推出新的這個能夠虛擬實境的這種眼鏡。
Even though, like, yes, maybe in history this is a new so-called like technology or invention.
也许在历史上这有点像是新的科技，
But again, when you boil it down to its core essence,
可是当你就谈到它真正的真实的东西，
right? Basically, it's going back to another device that helps people to either make their life easier or to entertain themselves, to escape. Right?
到它的核心就可以看到这个东西其实就是让一个人的生活更舒适，或是可以远离逃避实际。
Yeah, so people have been inventing things to try to escape, right, this world or escape reality, right, for many millennia already. Yeah.
所以已经有几千年来，很多人就是想要可能脱离逃避现实。
Yeah, think about your own work, right, whatever job you are doing. Right?
如果我们想象我们自己想想看自己我们正在做的工作，
Yeah, boil it down, right?
然后再把它全部抛开，
Again, people have been doing that for centuries, millennia, right?
看到核心的话，其实人已经做了几千年了。
Okay, so this is also the reality of all that labor, all those accomplishments. Right?
这就是所有这些成就还有劳碌的现实。
Let's go back to chapter 2, verse 18.
2章18节，
Chapter 2, verse 18.
2章18节。
Then I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me.
我恨恶一切的劳碌，就是我在日光之下的劳碌，因为我得来的必留给我以后的人。
Here's another sad reality of all those labors, all those accomplishments,
这是另外一个很伤心的这种现实，
which is that you can't keep it forever.
你不能永久保留。
Right? Just like it says in the book of Job, right? We come into this world empty-handed, and we will also go empty-handed.
就像约伯记也有谈到，我们是空手而来，然后空手离去。
Right? So whatever you do accomplish in this world under the sun, it stays here under the sun.
你在这世上有做的这些成就、做的东西，都会留在这世上
And，it'll be just left to whoever comes after you. Right?
就是留给以后的人。
They take all that labor and then they will either maybe build upon it or they will basically burn it down.
那这些以后的人，他们要不然就是会把这些东西，然后再加添做的更多，或者就是全部都烧掉。
Right? So chapter 2, verse 19.
2章19节，
Right? It says, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool?
那人是智慧是愚昧，谁能知
That
道？
person who takes your work, you don't know if he's actually going to be a good successor.
那个拿你的成就的人，你也不知道他会不会是个好的。
And so all those years, all that sweat, all that labor that you did, that next person could be a fool.
所以你所有那些的成就劳碌，还有流汗流血的这些工作，到最后也有可能是
It can
虚空，
all go down to really nothing. Right?
有可能到最后就归于零。
On the internet, you can look up, sometimes people have these lists, right? The worst CEOs in history. Right?
在网上有一些排名，可能就会看到是说做的最不好的、最差的总裁。
Right? And among one of them, right, you'll probably usually find this CEO of Kodak. Right?
通常都会找到这些排名里面，就其中一个都会是柯达的这个
For the older people, we all know Kodak.
总裁，可能年纪大一点的人会知道这个牌子。
Because, we had old film cameras. We had to buy Kodak film. We had to go and develop that film.
柯达它就是以前是做相机，然后还有要洗照片。
Right? So they were basically the major name brand film. Right?
以前都是做这些底片，然后相片
So there
大
was a
名字
CEO in the 90s who basically was kind of just, basically the person had all this within his disposal, right?
所以在90年代的时候，那这个总裁他也就有所有这些成就在他手中。
Their research and develop team were the first ones to invent digital cameras.
他们的研发组就是第一组能够成功研发出数位相机的，
Right? It's Kodak who invented digital cameras.
其实是柯达这个牌子。
But then they didn't pour more investment into it, right?
可是他们却没有花更多的投资，
They just thought we just coast off the brand recognition for the film,
他们觉得反正我们的底片很有名
right? It's a type of complacency.
就是因为他们就舒适。
And of course, later on, digital cameras was the future. It took basically the whole market now, right?
不过当然后来市场其实都是被了数位相机占领。
Right? And so looking back, people say that was one of the most foolish, times, right? One of the foolish CEOs of the time.
所以回头看的时候，那很多人就是说，那这就是那时候很愚昧的总裁。
Yeah, so I think the founder of Kodak, his last name was Kodak, I think, right? So, he spent, I don't know how many years building up this company, building up their reputation. Now, almost the young people, right? Nobody knows Kodak, right? If I ask my daughter, no, I don't think she knows Kodak, right?
那所以柯达的原创者好像就是姓柯达这个名字。那可是其实现今的年轻人，像我问我女儿，不会有人知道柯达是谁。
Right. So that's also an unfortunate reality of all these labor and accomplishments. Right?
所以很可惜，这个就是现实。
Okay, if we also now go to chapter 2, verse 21.
2章21节。
Chapter 2, verse 21.
2章21
For
节。
there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill. Yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. Right?
21节，因为有人用智慧、知识、灵巧所劳碌得来的，却要留给未曾劳碌的人为分，这也是虚空，也是大患。
Okay, so this also is a sad reality.
这也是很悲惨的
Right?
现
Because
实。
the person you leave it to, all those accomplishments to, they didn't go through all that difficulty and sweat.
当你留这些成就给后代的人，可是他们都没有经历像你那时候的流汗，
Okay? And then so therefore sometimes they may not treasure it as much.
所以有时候他们就不会珍惜。
Okay? And that's why I think there's a Chinese saying that says wealth does not remain past 3 generations in a family.
所以中国人就有一句话，就会是说，如果是财富的话，是不会过3代的，
Right? Because the younger generation, they didn't labor as the first generation.
因为年轻的一代他们就没有像上一代劳苦过。
Right? And then so and then so it just seems very, and then so everything is gone in the end, and it's very vain and very meaningless.
所以所有的东西就会消失，而且是虚空的。
And not only that, in verse 23,
23节，
it talks about that when you were laboring, it's really full of sorrow and burden.
谈到这劳苦其实是愁烦忧虑，
Right? And even the night, his heart takes no rest.
连夜间心也不安，
This also is vanity.
这也是虚空。
Right? So in order to accomplish what you did, it probably required a lot of sleepless nights.
当你要做好你想要做的成就，可能要很多晚没睡。
Right? But again, in the end, it goes to someone else.
可是到最后是给别人。
And so when you look back, what is the ultimate meaning of everything that we have sweated for?
当你回头看的时候，那你所有用汗经过这些劳苦，到底是为什么？
So these are some reflections of Solomon to help us to see more clearly what is the nature of labor and all those earthly accomplishments.
这就是所罗门他来感想，回头看说，做了所有这些的成就，那到底结果是什么？
Okay, let's now go to the third topic, right?
第3点，
Right. Let's now go to the nature of mirth and pleasure.
看清欢乐和享受。
Let's go to chapter 2, verse 1.
2章1节，
Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 1.
传道书2章1节。
I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure. But surely this also was vanity. Verse 2.
2
I said of laughter, madness, and of mirth, what does it accomplish? Verse 3.
3
I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven all the days of their lives. Please read.
1节，我心里说，来吧，我以喜乐试试你，你好享福。谁知这也是虚空。2我只嬉笑说，这是狂妄；论喜乐说，有何功效呢？3我心里察就如何用酒使我肉体舒畅，我心却乃仍以智慧引导我，又如何持住愚昧，等我看明世人，在天下一生当行何事为美。
So this is something else that Solomon decided to pursue.
这也是所罗门他所追求的。
And this is something that we, people on the earth also will pursue too.
这是我们在世上的人也会追求的。
Right? But what did Solomon eventually realize?
可是后来所罗门他发现什么？
Well, if we go back to chapter 1, verse 8.
我们看回去1章8节，
We can go back to that phrase, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing.
这一句就说眼看看不饱，耳听听不足。
Right? This is also not only applies to labor, but also applies to mirth and pleasure.
其实不只是谈到劳碌，而是还有喜乐，还有享乐。
Right? Because whatever enjoyment we try to pursue, it could be, socializing, partying, it could be media, entertainment.
不管我们想要追求什么样的享乐，也许是派对，或是媒体，
Right? In the end, the heart will never be satisfied.
到最后心中不会满足。
I think we maybe all have had that experience. Maybe you watched a TV show, you finished a series.
我们应该都有这种体验过，比如说看完了个电视剧，
You really were invested in all the characters. You got very invested in the whole story.
你在这所有的角色里面都很投入，还有故事也很投入。
You were very enamored by the whole world that the creators built in that particular series.
你很喜爱这整个电视剧中的这整个世界，
But in the end, there's a finale, right?
可是最后剧还是要演完，
In the end, it will conclude.
最后就是有结局，
Or maybe before it concludes, it's canceled, right?
或是结束之前可能就被取消。
And basically, even if it finishes to the end, what do you gain after it, right?
那就算已经演完的话，那你得到什么？
There's just this, at least for me, there's this blank, there's just a moment where you just maybe blankly stare at the screen, right?
那对我来说，有时候可能就像看着荧幕，然后就发呆，
And then you just think about, oh, now what?
然后就想说，那现在呢？
Oh, that's over, right?
那这就结束了，
You can't get that back anymore, right?
你也没有办法挽回。
Yeah, while you were in it, of course, you were so happy, so like you were taking everything in.
当你之前在看的时候很快乐，而且就是一直在投
But
入，
the eye is never satisfied. Right?
可是眼却
And the ear is never filled with the hearing, with music or whatnot, right?
看不饱，耳也听不足。
Right? You want to always have something else that's new.
你就是又会想要新的，
Right? That is the nature of mirth and pleasure.
这就是这个喜乐享乐的本质。
Yeah, so that's why in going back to Ecclesiastes chapter 2,
看回去传道书2章，
in chapter 2,
2章，
that's why Solomon came to that conclusion too.
所罗门就这样定下结论。
He said of laughter, madness.
他说：“我只嬉笑说这是狂妄。
Right? He's saying that, people want to laugh, people want to enjoy things. Right?
人想要笑，想要享受，
But he eventually called it madness.
可是他却说这是狂妄。
He's just saying that he sees that it doesn't really make sense
因为他觉得这不合理，
because it's so fleeting. It's just chasing after the wind.
因为这就像在捕风。
And then later he said of mirth,
然后论喜乐，
right? What does it accomplish?
那有何功效呢？
You were happy for those moments, for those hours, but now what? Now what?
你那个时候那几个小时喜乐，然后后来呢？
Right? So what we experience today is what Solomon already long experienced before too.
我们今天当体验的，就像所罗门他已经体验过了。
Yeah, after if you really just keep on pursuing mirth and pleasure, in the end, it's just still going to be empty.
如果你就是一直在追求喜乐，那你到最后只会感觉到空虚。
So of course, we're not saying that it is evil, right? But we have to know its limits. We have to see it clearly.
当然不是说这是邪恶的，可是我们要看到这个有限。
Okay, let's now finally go to the fourth point. Right?
我们最后第4点，
We also need to see clearly the nature of wealth and possessions.
我们要看清财富和资产的本质。
Of course, this is connected to labor. Right?
当然，这是跟劳碌有关。
Because through labor, then we can accumulate wealth.
经由劳碌，我们才能够累积财富，
Yeah, then we have more possessions. Right?
然后就会有更多拥有的资产。
But let's see what Solomon eventually learned about this.
所罗门后来学到的是什么？
Let's read chapter 2, verse 4.
2章4节，
Ecclesiastes 2:4.
2章4节。
I made my works great. I built myself houses and planted myself vineyards. Verse 5.
5节，
I made myself gardens and orchards and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. Verse 6.
6节，
I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. Verse 7.
7
Acquired male and female servants, and had servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. Verse 8.
8节，
I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the special treasures of kings and of the provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the sons of men, and musical instruments of all kinds, right? Verse 9.
9节，
So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me, right? Verse 10.
10节，
Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them, right? I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor. Verse 11.
11节，
Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled. And indeed, all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. Please read verse 11. Right?
11节，后来我查看我手所经营的一切事和我劳碌所成的功，谁知都是虚空，都是捕风，在日光之下毫无益处。
In the verses that we were just reading, we could see Solomon really invested himself in accumulating a lot of possessions and wealth.
在我们看到这几节，我们可以看到所罗门他真的是有累积了很多的财宝，还有资产。
Whether it was related to like houses and buildings and real estate,
不管是有关于房地产这些，
or it was related to his like gardens and fields,
或是他的不同果园，
so that he could even have like it seems like this advanced irrigation system, right?
他甚至有很多这些水泥的这种管道。
Right? Or he was able to accumulate a very large workforce.
他也有很多的工人，
Or he was also able to accumulate a lot of herds and flocks.
还有很多的牛群、羊群，
And then he was able to have special treasures too.
他还有特别的财宝。
And so if you read First Kings, like he was collecting very exotic animals too.
如果我们看列王记上的话，他也有收集了很多很特别稀有的动物。
But after he poured his heart into accumulating all this wealth and possession, what was his conclusion?
可是，在他花了很多心思，那也培养还有累积了这些，那可是最后呢？
In the end, he said, all was vanity.
他说一切都是虚
All
空，
was a grasping for the wind,
一切都是捕风，
because there was no profit under the sun.
因为在日光之下毫无益处。
Right? What it means by profit is, yes, physically he got more, but in his heart he gained nothing. There's nothing that he really felt satisfied from.
他意思是，这益处是说，虽然他肉体上有累积了很多，可是他的心中却没有满足。
Let's also go to Ecclesiastes chapter 6.
看传道书6章，
Ecclesiastes chapter 6.
传道书6章。
A man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor, so that he lacks nothing for himself for all he desires. Yet God does not give him power to eat of it, but a foreigner consumes it. This is vanity and is an evil affliction. Please read.
Sorry, what?
Chapter 6, verse 2. Right?
6章2节，2节就是人蒙神赐他资产丰富尊荣，以致他心里所愿的一样都不缺，只是神使他不能吃用，凡有外人来吃用，这是虚空，也是祸患。
Right? Here it mentions two more points regarding wealth and possessions.
这是2个点有关于资产。
The first is that, yes, maybe you can gain a lot of wealth and possessions,
第一个就是，也许你是可以得到很多的资
and you
产，
lack nothing.
那什么都不缺乏。
But maybe God does not give you the power, right? The ability to enjoy what you gained.
可是也许神不会赐给你力量来能够吃用，
Right? So truly, sometimes that applies to certain people.
所以这真的就是有时候有的人会这样，
Right? Some people may be some of the richest people in the world,
有的人可能是世界上最有钱的人，
but in the end, maybe their health deteriorates.
可是也许到最后他们的健康就不好，
Yeah, and then they basically have no appetite, or they don't have even mobility to go to places.
他们可能没有食欲或是行动不方便，
Right? God did not give them the power to enjoy their wealth.
神就没有赐给他们这个吃用，
that is really like a vanity then, right?
这就是个虚空。
Right? But another reality is maybe a foreigner is the one who consumes it.
那另外一个现实就是可能是外人，
Right? You don't get to consume it, but another person consumes it.
你不能吃用，可是别人可以。
Right? And so again, that goes back to like ultimately, how was that really meaningful then?
那这就是谈到这个总结，就是说，那这是有什么意义呢？
Right? Because I can't enjoy it. Other people now are enjoying what I labored to do.
我不能享受，可是别人在享受我自己劳苦。
That was my wealth, but now that wealth is going to other people. Right?
这是我的财富，可是这却是赐给别人的。
So we all know about Alexander the Great. Right?
我们都知道亚历山大，
At that time, he amassed the largest empire of its kind. Right?
他在当时他有最强大的帝国，
Right? From Macedonia in Europe all the way to the borders of India. Right?
从欧洲的马其顿一直到印度的边界，
Right? He did all this within 10 years.
在10年内他就做到了。
Right? I think he was 23, I think, when he became emperor. And then he died around 33, right?
他那时候大概23岁，然后大概33岁的时候
I
死
think
了。
something like that, right?
差不多。
And in the end, he didn't have a clear successor.
他到最后没有要继承他的，
Right? So then, who took over this huge empire?
所以就是变成是谁来继承这个帝国
Later,
呢？
there were 4 of his generals warring over all this territory. Right?
他有4个将军都是一直在打仗要
And then
争，
that entered into another period, right, of ancient history.
然后就后来又变成是历史了。
And eventually, these 4 different generals eventually conquered 4 different of Alexander the Great's territory. Yeah.
所以后来这4个将军他们就分了4个部分他的帝国。
Right? So Alexander the Great died early. He didn't really enjoy whatever he amassed.
那亚历山大他也就死了，也没有办法享受他自己
In
的
the
成
end, all
就，
of it was given to these so-called foreigners.
而且其实到最后都是给了这些外
They
人，
were the ones who enjoyed it and consumed it. Right?
是他们来享受来吃用
Yeah.。So in this particular session, right, we went over a lot of different earthly pursuits under the sun.
所以在我们这一次就谈到了很多不同世上的追求。
Yes, there could be a lot of these things that are quite flashy and attractive, right?
也许
They glow bright in the sun.
有一些看起来是很有吸引力，而且日光下会照得很光亮。
But hopefully, we can really take Solomon's experience and his learning and put it into our heart.
我们希望我们是能够把所罗门的教训，让我们能够放在心中。
Right? Let's also be able to see things clearly for what they are.
我们也要用眼睛看清楚这些事情。
See things.
唱诗
Sing him 235.
235首，
Hymn 235.
235。